Welcome to the CoSuccess and Conversation series. Today we are going to be talking about the underappreciated power of great guiding principles. And I'm delighted to say that I have my guest today is Susan Hensley. Susan is the VP of Human Resources at the E&J Gallo Winery. This is the largest family-owned winery in the US. Welcome to CoSuccess and Conversation, Susan.
Oh, Anton, you know how excited I am to be here because I take a little bit of umbrage at the title of underappreciated guiding principles because for me, they have been like magic from when you first introduced them. I don't know, some 15, 18 years ago. I think we went back recently and tried to figure out how long we've had the pleasure of working together. So yes, we will talk about how some people think they're underappreciated and why I think they are the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Okay, so why don't we kick off maybe just, I do know quite often people, when I first mention the word guiding principles, there's a bit of a, what's that? So how would you define guiding principles if it was like a new team or you were helping a team kind of come up with those?
Sure. So if you think about a team that's forming and you're really doing the work to make the team great. So you have to picture that the setting is the team has already come together and is working on its real purpose and why the team exists. So you're doing that hard work of clarifying why we are here and the roles we play. And in working with CoSuccess over the years, right, we leverage Belbin to really have a deep understanding of the roles we're bringing and what we want to lean in with. So as we're going through doing that work, and the team is starting to feel clearer about purpose and how we each show up and what we're bringing to really help the team be a great team, most people want to stop there. The guiding principles for me, if you think of that as I love analogies. I'm probably not going to get this right at first or metaphors. If you think of the purpose of being really the vital organs, and then you've got like the skeleton of the roles, I find the guiding principles are sort of like the muscle. It's what makes it work. And when you develop guiding principles that really help the team figure out like day in, day out, how do we act? It becomes what really supports, I find, that the purpose of the team and what makes working on the team fun because you've developed your own shorthand. It's almost what I call culture building for the team. So I think there's a lot of things for us to, as we chat, to really unpack because I am afraid at first exposure to guiding principles, it can feel a little bit like mom and apple pie. Or I remember when my son was in kindergarten, there was like king of kindness for the day. And it's sort of like, be nice, which although true, doesn't really give you enough meat. So really well-intentioned guiding principles, I think, give a team that culture and a real way to pick up the pace very, very quickly.
Yeah, and let me build on that because you're absolutely right. The way you pick it is I often find the guiding principle, when they're well crafted, fit between a very sort of tactical ground rule, like, for example, we'll start our meetings on time, which, okay, that's great, but it's just a ground rule. And the other end, which is kind of where you're going with your, the kindergarten piece, is what I would call a motherhood statement. We'll work well together.
Yes.
Okay, but what does that really mean? It just doesn't have any real tangible value. And I think one thing I've noticed with you when you get these going with your teams is they're hyper specific. What are we dealing with right here, right now? They're tight. They're usually very short. We'll get into some of your favorites in a minute, that you've used. And keeping them, as you said, really they become part of the language of the team or the lexicon of the team that we use them. And you can use 2 or 3 words to say a paragraph or something. And it really enables you to build on that. So I think you're absolutely spot on. So let's build on that. From you've been doing these for a long time. What have been some of your, let's say, your all-time top 1, 2, 3 as you think back on the different ones you've used?
Yeah, so there is what I call the shining star one, the Everest one, and then the others fall quite a bit. And you're laughing because
I know what it is.
you know what it is, because it has become part of our much broader culture. It's really interesting what it says. So the what I call the Everest of guiding principles for me for about the last 5 years here at Gallo and all the different teams I've been part of, is assume misalignment. And what it has really come to mean with what has been going on in the business and with the team's experience is we all are coming at things very fast, right? Everyone's experience, there's a lot of change. The pace of business is moving very, very quickly. And we enter into the room and start driving sort of at whatever the perspective is. And when we use assume misalignment, it almost has become a sentence starter when you start to speak. It's like, I'm going to assume a certain misalignment here. This is where I'm coming from. Here's what has changed. And then it allows other people to very quickly say, got it. No, we're not here, right? I just talked to this person, or we just heard this, or the new data shows X. So it allows almost everyone to get on the page, but being very candid and open with no one feeling like they have to have all the answers, where you just say, we're assuming we're not in the same place right now. So, or if I am spot on and the team somehow has not become misaligned, then it creates a spot for everyone to say, yes, I'm tracking with you. We're still there. We used it the first time in a very, very complex enterprise-wide implementation, software system implementation. But darn if it hasn't been effective on large-scale org design, on all things COVID. Let's just say that in the last 18 months, it has been really critical on the various teams that have worked on policies and practices around COVID. It seems to take what I'd call any reticence to saying I'm lost or I'm not tracking out. And it gives a lot of grace to the speaker when they use it to be corrected. So I also find it a really helpful hierarchical leveler.
Let me build on, because I love how you're saying, you mentioned earlier, it almost is it's a sentence starter, but it's a very significant sentence starter because in fact, it's very disarming.
Yes.
It immediately puts the context of, okay, I think we need to talk about this. I'm not sure, but I don't come in going, what were you thinking? Which could be an alternative way of going at it, which is going to be a much more charged conversation. It's much more okay, I'm not sure. Let me put this out. So it opens that sentence, and it also feels to me that in the same way it starts it's a context and a trust builder, because it's sort of giving permission for us to have a misunderstanding without there being heavy consequences behind it. But is that kind of what you've seen?
No, that's exactly it. It makes it all what you would call okay, to be really honest and to remember that what we are trying to do is do great work as a team and do a great job on whatever it is, the project in this, by clearing out, by giving everyone away or everyone an avenue, right? To say they're lost or confused without I have paid no attention. So I think it's also a great cover in the world if we get disconnected for I just spaced out and paid no attention. and people do use it with one of the things I've been really impressed with. There's a lot of good humor, which I think whenever we can have humor on I take all the work very, very serious. I have a very serious side, but it enables me to also lighten up as a leader and to sort of claim that position. I think it relaxes a team and then builds understanding.
Breaks the tension a wee bit as well. Yes, I think that's a good point.
I think that ability, Anton, to break the tension with the team is another what I call superpower or underappreciated power of the guiding principles, is as you develop a certain amount of shorthand with these guiding principles, it does break the tension. one of my next favorite is not one that one of my teams developed, but you developed it with another team here. And I'm just going to say it. There's an acronym for it, but it was really bitch and moan and move on, right? Sometimes, and I'm speaking, for any team can experience this when forces outside of your control. In many cases, they can be regulatory kind of forces or the legal world that we can work in, where you're really trying to figure out compliance and culture and how you manage through change. People really need the freedom, if you will, to be able to, for a moment or two, be like, oh my gosh, it's terrible, without someone being very nanny on them, right? And then, but you don't do it for long, right? That's where the move on. I mean, you worked with that team when they developed it. What was their thinking?
Well, no, it was exactly, and it's interesting, 'cause I think the more politically correct version is VAMO, vent and move on, because that kind of got them out of some delicate situations. But it's the same thing. And where it played out, and it's something I actually want to follow up with you, is for a lot of people, when they initially get some guiding principles going to go, oh, these are cool. I like these. But they're sort of adjacent to their work. And as their work really picks up pace and stress and tension and maybe deadlines, they kind of get slipped a bit off as they pile into this. One of the things that I've noticed with you is, in fact, the more the speed picks up, the more the guiding principles stay in there and get updated and modified. Like, well, I think at one stage we were even looking at them weekly or 2 weekly at one stage.
We were.
That hectic. But the team that came up with the VAMO was much the same. It was an operations team. They would, it was almost like they were in the ring with 5 other opponents, just getting hit by something, one thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And when they did get together, they almost initially felt guilty. Well, we're just having a kind of we're just dumping on things. And it was like, well, hang on. There's nothing wrong with that. And exactly to your point, as long as you don't stay there. Let it out, feel a bit better. Okay, what are we going to do about it now? And that was the piece when they'd felt, and it's actually something it's a different topic, but I'm hearing more. A lot of people are struggling with feeling heard at the moment. And giving people that room to actually vent a little bit, even if we can't do anything about it, just simply hearing myself say these words, I got that off my chest. I'm feeling better now, and we can move forward as we go through there. So I think that plays out a lot. Following through, you talked a couple of times how it kind of bothers you that they're kind of underappreciated.
Yes.
Let's dig in a bit on why do you feel, from what you've seen with, my goodness, you've worked with an awful lot of teams. What's the difference between when they are appreciated versus when they're kind of not really appreciated in your mind as you look at this?
Because I'm going to talk about, this is very reflective of my bias, and I don't know how much folks watchers really understand Belbin team profiles. I have some Shaper in my top 3. So for me in teams, it has become a tool that really helps me minimize and much more leverage my coordinator and resource investigator preferences. So if I aspire to be what I think of and as my best leader self, they're really critical for my success. So let me just sort of say, I have anchored onto these because they really help teams I work on be their best self. Where I've noticed the difference is it gives us shorthand. It allows us, in many cases, to overcome for either strengths we're misusing or when we are in what you'd call forgivable downside of roles. It allows the team a way to function and diffuse tension, right? To sort of shake off whatever's going on. We have used during COVID, give and get grace. Like really accept that someone is telling you, it is okay. It is okay that you are expressing this. And then at the same point, figuring out how to give it. I had never thought before the last, say, 14 months to really be talking about giving and getting grace as a guiding principle. And yet it was such an important one for the time, because it took the team to a different level of, we are not just here doing, and we're not just professionals. We are people who are feeling and coping. Mm-hmm. And that touched folks on a different plane. So if I start over here with why I think they're critical, and I really do think they're critical, where I've more observed teams, it has felt like we've had this one meeting and we've done this, and now we're just going to do the business. And I think one of the challenge we all face is in trying to set a team up for success takes a lot of discipline. We've really built in reviewing our guiding principles every single meeting, and even on some teams I've been on, telling an anecdote. Who has an anecdote where you use this well or where you wish you would have? So there's a real discipline. And I think when teams and leaders don't build in the discipline, it becomes something you do. You put on a PowerPoint slide or a Jamboard, you put it somewhere and it goes and gathers dust or, moves into the ether. So I'd say it's really incumbent upon the team members or the team leader to bring it up and try and get people comfortable using the shorthand, because the payoff in terms of what I'd call culture building, it's very, very quick in terms of what it helps to do to build a culture, because the team has created these guiding principles. The team has wordsmithed these guiding principles. And so I find you get early ownership and adoption, that the team members feel heard and they work as a collective.
Yeah, I like that. And I find it's quite interesting when I'm often trying to help teams come up with the 4 to 5, you don't want more than that, 4 to 5 guiding principles. And very often they'll start out with ones they've heard that sounded cool or they liked, and they throw them in the pot. And then I'll kind of go, okay, but is this actually a problem that you're facing that you would need something like this to help you with it? And then every now and then there's sort of one comes out, or they change the wording on one, and it just sort of gets to it. And all of a sudden, that's the one I'm going to hear more about. That's the one that took on. And then there's a kind of, oh, that's how these work or what they mean. There was one team, it was the Vegas rules. It was that whole... And it was not like they had breaches of confidentiality, but
of course not.
There was a bit of just a wariness, let's say, that when they put it out there, and I said, well, are you comfortable with that? Like, you've got to be careful, because if you say that, I thought that was just a general conversation, so I shared it with somebody else. It's like, that was actually pretty sensitive. I didn't really want that to go outside of the team. Once they had even that conversation, what was interesting is it was used as much as a statement as a question. So if somebody was talking, someone would go, is this Vegas rules? Like, I want to know, is this something I can repeat? Or is this something we're going to keep within our own team? And that one stuck, a month later, 2 months later, how are these going? Oh, Vegas rules, we're using that all the time. So you can sort of see there are favorites. As you said, for you, it's that assumed misalignment is at the apogee of the top, but there are others that play out as well. So I think that's great. I know this is obviously a passionate topic. I know we could go on for this for a long time. I would like to thank you, first of all, for taking the time with us, Susan. I appreciate this, and thank you very much. And for everyone watching and listening, goodbye.